Good morning. It is Wednesday. That means Garland Nixon and Scott Ritter have a lot to say. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Scott Ritter. It's Wednesday morning, and let's start right off. A couple of stories we need to touch base on, and Sputnik International is reporting Russia's cutting-edge anti-aircraft systems downed 24 Ukrainian jets in 5 days. Moon of Alabama is reporting Ukraine's sudden high air losses likely caused by new Russian missiles. Apparently, they're saying that these new missiles, these aircraft that were shot down, 20 some in a matter of a few days. It says all of them were shot down far from the front line, outside the radius of Russian air defense systems, as well as outside the standard radius of Russian fighter missiles. Those pilots who were able to reject reported that until the moment their planes were hit, they did not receive warning information about the attack from the appropriate warning systems. The Americans believe that the Russian Aerospace Forces has acquired new missiles capable of not only hitting targets at great distance, but also after launch, independently pursuing a target without illuminating it from the aircraft's radar, using a radio signature to guide it. Scott Ritter, we're still just starting to get some information come out on this. One thing we know, we're pretty sure of, Ukrainians lost a hell of a lot of planes in a hurry. Whatever happened, this is new and they weren't ready for it. Your thoughts, Scott Ritter?
Well, I mean, as you said, this is a developing story, and there's some preliminary analysis out there that I have no reason to doubt. I respect Moon of Alabama. He's been very good in the past, and I'm pretty confident he's very good right now. But I can't claim to have any insight beyond that, except to point out the following. We in the West, we live in a bubble of arrogance, and it's an arrogance that's founded on the premise of our technological supremacy. We can build things that are better than anybody. And I mean, it's across the board, Garland. It's not just in Ukraine. Listen, what is the foundation of America's approach to arming Israel? So that Israel will retain a technological edge over any opponent. That's the going in premise. Now let's look at the United States and Afghanistan. We went into Afghanistan and we poured a whole bunch of technology into a low technology fight. Mm-hmm. And then we sit there and we pat ourselves on the back saying, we're pretty damn good. We certainly out-technologied them Taliban, but the Taliban still won. But that's irrelevant. We had this stealth drone nicknamed the Beast of Kandahar, RQ, I'm going to mess it up, 176, something of that nature. And it would take off from Kandahar and it would fly missions. Some people believe that it was the drone over Pakistan when the Bin Laden raid went down. The famous photograph of Obama and Hillary and everybody sitting there staring at the TV screen. What they were staring at was drone footage coming from the Beast of Kandahar. The Beast of Kandahar would also fly out of Afghanistan over Western Iraq or Iran, mapping out the Iranian, because in the city of Mashhad, a lot of people don't know this, the Iranians have built an underground city. It's their continuity of government plan. So that if Tehran goes boom, there will be an Iranian government underground in Mashhad. The North Koreans have come in and dug these very deep tunnels. And so we're in the process of trying to collect information on that. And we send over our drone because we're America. We got the technology. It's as if we don't remember what happened to the U-2 that got shot down over Sverdlovsk in 1961. But we build something, we fly it, they shoot it down. The Iranians had been watching the Beast of Kandahar take off and land from Kandahar, and they brought in their collection, and they were patient, and they sat there and they collected the signals. They got all the signals, and they realized that there's a ground station that takes the drone off, and then when the drone gets to a certain altitude, it does a turnover to a satellite of somebody sitting in Nevada who now operates the drone. Now, this is all encrypted. So the Iranians collected the signals, decrypted the signals, and said, we got this, boss. It took off, and when it was going to make the handover, the Iranians went, we'll take control of that baby. And they took control, and they landed it in Iran. And we sat there and went, how did they do that? Because they're Iranians. I mean, they hang out with camels, tents. They're not sophisticated. It's not as though Iranian teams go to the Shanghai Mathematical Olympics and place, in the top 3 all the time. It's not like they have the most peer-reviewed PhD thesis in the world. The Iranians are pretty damn good. Excuse my language. Another story, just because I'm making comparisons here. In 2006, Israel was fighting Hezbollah, and again, Hezbollah, a bunch of hill Shia guys. They get AK-47s and flip flops. But the Israelis were using our SINGARS radar, our radios. These are frequency hopping radios that are encrypted. So basically, if I'm talking to you, the frequency, the signal is going to be parsed out, and it's going to skip among frequencies to make capturing the signal virtually impossible unless you know the algorithm. And then as it's also being encrypted. So even if you get it, all you hear is unless you can decrypt it. And even if it takes you forever to capture the signal, send it off and decrypt it, it's no good to you. What happened is the Iranians, because they are listening all the time, had figured out how to intercept the SINGARs. They were able to track the signal and decrypt it in real time. And then they trained the Hezbollah guys in the Hebrew language so that they could mimic accents. And they'd been following this Israeli Special Forces unit, and they had listened to how they talk, and they mimicked it, and they knew the code words. And the Israelis were getting ready to move in on the Hezbollah position, communicating with their SINGARS frequency hopping encrypted radio. And the code word, let's just call it Apple. And so somebody comes on the line speaking the same accent and goes, execute Apple, execute Apple. And they went, execute Apple. And they go in straight into an ambush. They got wiped out. Why? Hezbollah set themselves up because Hezbollah was able to intercept the radio frequencies. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of smart people in the world today. We're out there selling things like the F-35. We're out there selling, we've been teaching the Ukrainians to fall back because we look at the Russian air defenses and they develop a tactical set that has them falling back. We've given them standoff weapons. And the Russians are just sitting there going, okay. And then they go and they do something such as produce the solution to the problem. And they have fielded this, in America. Could you imagine in the United States? Give me an example again. During the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, we had the IED problem, the improvised explosive device ambush problem. And I mean, everybody's seen that movie, The Hurt Locker. It's a war of wits between the guys who build the bombs and the guys who don't. You learn for signatures and all that stuff. Well, we created and we spent billions of dollars on something we called the anti-IED program. And we spent a lot of money building vehicles and all that stuff. We never turned anything around that fast. Okay, we'd conceive it, then it has to go to a factory. They got to build it. They got to test it. And, and all this stuff. The Russians just put forward what appears to be one of the most sophisticated air defense programs ever, guys, because we still don't know, apparently, what the hell happened. All we know is the planes went boom, We never detected it, and we are saturating the skies with our, AWACS, the radars. We're RC-135s. We are looking for everything, and they just sort of appear and boom. We still don't know what happened. The Russians do. Why? Because the Russians have been studying us, and they came up with the solution. Now, let's just think about this, Garland, what it means. So the MiG-29s are going boom. Well, wait till those Su-24s with the Storm Shadows start going boom, because they're going to go boom too. Because the storm, they have to come in a little bit closer, and they're going to get hit. So the Russians have basically nullified the Ukrainian Air Force. And those F-16s, we want to send them. Don't even bother, guys, because they won't even get off the ground. But that's not it. The sophistication of this is not just F-35s, Garland. AWACS, RC-135s, every drone we have out there. If this system is what it appears to be, the Russians have just guaranteed air supremacy in the next conflict, because we won't be able to get the most powerful aspect of our military, the one that gives us that technological advantage, off the ground. We will take things off, we will fly them into battle, and they will disappear, and we won't even understand how it happened. We don't know how the Russians are detecting these airplanes, because it's not an active radar lock-on. Yes, they have wide area surveillance and all that stuff, but normally if you're flying, it's an irritating tone. You've seen it in Hollywood, it's real. If you get a radar, you'll get the alert, and then if it gets a lock, it's screaming in your ear, and you're supposed to be juking and jiving and praying and puking because you're pulling a lot of G's. But that's not happening. These boys are just flying, and bam, they're dead. And if they aren't, knocked out, because a lot of times when you get hit like that, the impact, you'll black out, and then it's too late because you can't eject. You're going to die. But if they got hit and they're able to maintain, and they're not getting spun in by G's, they can eject, and then they're out. But the whole time they're coming down going, what the hell just happened to me? I have no idea. This is the thing. It's not just about shooting down Ukrainian MiGs. This is about, if Russia fields the system, they have achieved air supremacy. Now, here's the question that we don't know, but how is this against cruise missiles? How is this against ballistic missiles? Is this a system that can take out a hypersonic missile? We don't know. But what I can say is this: the Russian defense industry is one of the most sophisticated defense industries out there. They always were. During Soviet times, they had the greatest minds. We intercepted some gyros, guidance systems. In fact, I have one up here as a souvenir. It's been demilitarized, so I'm not violating any laws. They came out of a Soviet submarine-launched ballistic missile, and it's a gyro that when we got it, we cut it open. The level of engineering into this, it was all done by hand. And we evaluated, and they brought it, because even the Americans are just there going, we don't know what the hell this is. Well, they brought in some dude that had been part of the Apollo program. And he sat there and he said, yeah, this is the gyro that got us to the moon. This is what we used to do. We can't do it anymore. That's amazing. It's like the battleships. When we built the battleships in World War II and we mothballed them, when we brought them out, we had to look at the armor and start doing some repairs. And the steel that we used in the battleships, we can't make anymore. We don't know how. We lost that skill set. All the old iron workers are dead or dying. They had to go and pull up a bunch of 70-year-old dudes and say, come on in here and help us out. And they're like, yeah, let me show you how you do this. Take a handful of dirt, spit in it, do your tobacco. All right, you mix it up 5 times, you pray, you spit, throw some whiskey in there, and there it is, steel, the old-fashioned way. And we're like, oh, wow. Something like that. I'm being a little
I know what you're saying,
facetious here, but we've forgotten these things. But the Russians did that. But you're looking at it and you realize that this is coming out of a factory that has a retaining wall that's leaning in, and there's grass growing on the roof, and you're looking at it and you go, they can't produce. They produce the finest military equipment in the world, and their research and development guys are pure genius, and they never lost it. They're there now. And here's the kicker. They don't do it for profit.
Right.
They do it to serve their nation. So when their nation says, we got a whole bunch of airplanes that are causing us problems and we got to shoot them down now, they sit down there and they design a weapon. There's no overcharging. There's no lengthy R&D process. There's no, well, we're not going to do it until you give us this. It's let's get it done. And they did it, Garland. They took a concept. I mean, they had to collect the data. They had to build it. They had to test it. They had to produce it in quantities necessary to have an impact on the battlefield and then deploy it. And they did this in a couple hundred days. If we tried to do this, this is a 10 to 15 year program minimum for us, because our defense industry is not about producing stuff that's good for America. It's about making money. Their whole model is about stretching out the contract, underbidding, overcharging, and then their product is crap because halfway through, because the Russians didn't run into this problem. The Russians didn't, come in and go, hey, while we're here, the Americans deployed a new airplane. We have to change this missile. They just produced it and they put it out there. But we're sitting there going, the Russians just came up with a new gillywick on the Su-57. So we're going to add something to this. But that means a complete redesign. So we have to step back, completely rework it. Oh, we're going to need another $300 billion, please. And the Congress goes, yes, because that's the business model. Because Congress set these defense industries up in their respective hometowns so that they have money coming in for the jobs. This is a jobs program. It's not about national defense. What the Russians just did here should be a lesson to us all. And for anybody out there right now who's like denigrating Russian tanks, please understand that the most modern variant of the T-90 that's out on the battlefield right now just went through that same process, ladies and gentlemen. It's a tank that has been completely reimagined based upon the lessons of the modern battlefield. It's a tank that can survive on the modern battlefield. We're giving the Ukrainians tanks that were conceived back in the 1970s, built in the 1980s, and they're going up against the most modern byproduct of Russian defense industry thinking. Guys, this isn't even a fair fight, and it's not going to be a fair fight when we go against them too. For all you F-35 pilots out there, kiss your wives good night, good morning every time you go to work, and pray we don't go to work because you ain't coming home.
Let me answer this, Scott. The way I see it is, let me make sure. The way I see it is now, as far as the technological part of war, right? It's about distance. Namely, an example, we bring in a couple of aircraft carriers to the Mediterranean. The Russians say we're going to put some MiG-31s with Kinzhal missiles in the Black Sea. They can hit it from 1,500 kilometers, right? So you bring in these assets, and they can counter it with something that costs considerably less to disable that asset, to counter that asset. Okay. Technology like TVs. When TVs, these flat screen TVs, I know people have paid $5,000 and $10,000 for flat screen TVs. You can get them for a couple $100 now, right? If in fact what we're seeing something here. You're looking now again at okay, so now what you say is this. Well, when it comes to the Russians, you better not bring your ships within 1,700 kilometers of these missiles, or you're going to have a problem. You got to stay further away from them because they can reach out and touch you. So their standoff ability is far greater. Okay. In reading this, the appearance that we're getting, the initial data is that they're able to strike from A, far greater distance, standoff, and B, now, traditionally, what does a plane do? It drops flares, it does all kinds of things to try to fool a missile. There's all kinds of things you can do to deal with that. If they don't see the missile coming, they can't do anything. No. And if it's further away, now, not only do your ships have to be way out of range, now your planes, far before they would normally be vulnerable to anti-aircraft system, have to fire everything they have. So what you've done is created this huge envelope and bubble distance from any of your assets, that you can protect your assets from further away than your adversary can hit them, and you can strike your enemy from within that protective bubble that you've created, be it through missiles or anti-aircraft. If in fact what we're seeing is true, this is a significant game changer in international military, in international military conflict. Scott.
Absolutely. And again, let's just think of the technology that's involved here. It's a fire and forget missile that doesn't require any. Now, as much as I badmouth American defense industry, Garland, you know, and I know that we have fantastic scientists in the United States, and they're looking at this, and they know. I can guarantee you, somewhere, someplace in Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Boeing, there's a bunch of guys going, man, we've been working on that for 20 years. I mean, they look at it and they go, that's what we've been trying to do. So they know what's happening. They just don't know how it happened, but they know the theory behind it. Because, there's been whispers in, defense journals and everything you read about the next level of technology that America is aspiring to, these miracle weapons, these fire and forget weapons that will nullify all defenses out there because they don't follow the normal pattern. Well, the Russians just beat us to the punch. We're going to field a weapon like that at some point in time too. And I think now we have an urgency. We've had an urgency to put a hypersonic weapon out there for a while, and we just can't do it. Boeing keeps screwing up the tests. So that Dark Eagle that I was panicking about, and I was panicking about it. This Dark Eagle intermediate range ground launch system. I believe the hype that it was getting ready to be deployed last year. And I'm like, man, this changes everything. Well, not so fast, because they haven't quite been able to perfect the technology. They will eventually, et cetera. But if you can reach out and touch an airplane like that without it having a clue that it's about to be shot down, what about that aircraft carrier that's sitting in the Mediterranean right now? And I'm not talking about the Kinzhal, because the Kinzhal's an older weapon. It's, I think we'll be able to detect the Kinzhal. That's not going to be one of those where we go, we didn't see it coming. It's going to be one of those going, we see it coming, there's not a damn thing we can do to stop it, kind of thing. But the Chinese, and I don't know how many Americans realize this, that when we moved the two carriers into where they're positioned right now in the Eastern Mediterranean, we moved them in range of the Chinese missiles designed to sink aircraft carriers. You're going, China, what are you talking about? Look at a map, guys. Just simply draw a line from the Eastern Med. You go through Turkey, you go through the Caucasus, you get into Kazakhstan, you go across Central Asia, and there you are in Western China. And if they put their systems out there, and they're out there, we're in their range now. Now imagine they fire this system, and they have the same fire and forget technology. It's up, it's gone, and we're waiting for some sort of evidence that they're going to lock in on us, but it's moving in, it tracks, it hits the carrier, and the carrier didn't even know it until it happened. That's the future right now. We are married to legacy systems. We're married to legacy tactics. I talked to a Russian colonel the other day, and I've heard this from other Russians. A lot of guys like me, I'm going to be honest, are looking at the videos of the infantry engagements that are taking place in Ukraine. And I'm going, that's not how a Marine rifle company would deploy. Come on, man. I mean, you're coming in. Where's your assault element? There's got to be more than just a handful of guys. Why don't you have your base of fire over here? Why aren't guys maneuvering? Why don't I see that? And the Russians like, because they'd all be dead. You don't understand what's happening right now, Scott. There are drones flying over. And anytime you get like 5 guys together, one of these little tiny FPV drones comes in and boom, gets them. Or you get 15 guys and the artillery system comes. So infantry is dispersed. This is a dispersed war. You don't get those mass. When the infantry comes together, it's mass. And they're all sitting there looking at the Israelis going, you see the Israelis come in doing their mass SWAT tactics, and they go, when they go into Gaza like that, they're all going to die. They're all going to die. You can't fight like that anymore. You literally, this is a war of 1 or 2 infantrymen moving together. There's others backing them up, but you're going to be scattered across the battlefield not masked. You're relying on Overwatch. It's a whole new war out there, Garland. A whole new war with a whole new kind of technology, which requires a whole new way of thinking. And now it just got even more complicated, especially for the West, because the pathetic Western warriors that spent the last 20 years blowing up Afghan wedding parties and kicking down the doors of Iraqi villagers are used to having constant air support. That's the whole way we fight. That's the way I was trained to fight. I'm not one of these guys. There's a lot of guys out there that are very good at this. I ain't one of them. I'm one of these guys. This is how I kill you. I get on the radio and I call in air power. I'm very good at that. I can run a couple radios, got them here. I can bam, 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 bring in the air flags, bring in the artillery, bring in the naval gunfire, bring in the mortar rounds. You name it, I can adjust it, move it, and all that stuff. But I always just assumed that the airplanes were going to be there. Now imagine that my boys are maneuvering and they're getting slaughtered because they're still grouping together because they're using the old school tactics, but they're starting to scatter out, but they're in trouble. We need that airfare. And I'm picking up, calling it in, and Yankee 2-3 ain't there anymore because it got blown up by a missile that they never even saw coming. This is the new way of war. Everybody's been criticizing the Russians. You've heard it, Carl. Where's the Russian Air Force? Because all the Americans are going, they should be stacking them overhead, bringing in their Air Force and blowing up the Ukrainians. Because the Russians don't play that way. The Russian Air Force is in the back, releasing their munitions outside the envelope of the Ukrainian air defense. If they do come in, it's one or two at a time, and they're flying in low, they fire, and then they get the hell out of Dodge. And every once in a while, they get shot down because war's a tough business. And everybody's criticizing I just love it how we in the West, because the Russians use this pop-up technique. Basically, it's a targeting system where you know where the point is on the ground, and as you're flying, the system's calculating. You're gonna lift up, and it's gonna tell you a release point in the sky to fire, and you fire, and then you go away, and then it comes in, and it's surprisingly accurate, guys. It's like hitting right where it's supposed to. But all the Americans, including me, are going, that's amateur stuff. We don't do that. We come in, get eyes on target, get a visual, fire, straight line of sight, and the Russians are going, yeah, that'll last about one time in combat, in modern combat, and then you'll be dead. You'll be gone. The Israeli Air Force is flying over, blowing up all the people in Gaza, won't survive a day against a modern air defense system. That's just a statement of fact. War has changed. And what this new ballistic missile or this new anti-air missile shows is just that fact. It has changed it has changed radically the reality, the face of war. And we're still trapped in legacy ways of doing business. We still have guys called JTACs, highly trained guys that call in airstrikes. They have no utility today. A JTAC has no utility in modern warfare because you can't stack airplanes and bring them in on the target like you used to. Because the airplanes, as you stack them, they're just going to be hit by these missiles taking them down. Air power is a completely new thing. The JDAM, we may have to reconsider the JDAM because, how far out can we be? How high up do we go? But if they have a missile now that can reach out and touch us, did the Russians just take the JDAM out of the battle? And the JDAM is sort of what we got. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to have to go to cruise missiles. We don't have, we can't fire. War has changed, and I just don't think the West has woken up. All these NATO guys that are out there, wait till NATO gets in there. Guys, I'm just here to tell you right now, NATO wouldn't stand a chance on the modern battlefield. NATO has to sit back and reimagine the battlefield and then spend hundreds of billions of dollars to retool, re-equip, retrain, because what NATO's doing right now is just an invitation to a massive grave.
Well, I'll say this. It appears to me that the Kinzhal missile changed the battle, changed the nature of war, in that, as I said, normally, okay, there's a couple of aircraft carriers in, that's a problem. The Russians say there's some aircraft carriers there, and we got a couple bases that are vulnerable. We'll fly a couple of planes with a missile. And if that becomes a threat to us, we will neutralize the threat. That Kinzhal missile changed the nature of war. Now you can't just say, we'll put these aircraft carriers anywhere we want and we'll attack it. No. You got to be real worried about where they are and what happens to them. That being said, if what we're looking at is some kind of technology where you've greatly increased the distance that you can attack, and you can ground to air or air to air, greater distance, and they don't have to paint it with radar. You know, one of the things that we know, an airplane is out there, it's emitting all kinds of signals. All kinds of stuff is coming, radiation and all radio signals, you name it, it's emitting all kinds of signals. If they found a way to lock in on some of those other signals or that group of signals from a long distance and just fire it, see you later, and you don't see it coming, that to me is as great, maybe even a greater change to warfare today than the Kinzhal missiles. But put those two together. If you now take your Onyx missiles, if you now take your other missiles that they have, and now you can build them with whatever this new technology is, how does the ships missile defense work? How does any of this missile defense work if you've now found a way that you don't need radar and you can lock missiles on from greater distance? To me, it's you're in a horse and buggy, and this guy's in a Maserati. If what we're saying, I mean, 20 some missiles, 20 some planes in 5 days, it seems, and they don't have that many planes. It seems like now they put it in the air, it goes down. But that's, as I said, to me, it's a greater advantage even than the Kinzhal. Am I overstating things?
No, you're right. Look, they don't have that many airplanes, but they had MiG-29s. Almost all of them had been modified. The main role of the MiG-29 is to be a delivery system for the HARM missile, the anti-radiation missile that we use and now the Ukrainians use to take out air defense radars of that such. And the harm, I mean, the Russians have dialed it in. They've been shooting down the harms. A lot of the harms that we give the Ukrainians are out of date, and they just sort of go any which way they want. But every now and then, the harm works as advertised, and it takes out Russian radars. And it's been effective. It's frustrating for the Russians. We keep talking about up to 500,000, Ukrainian dead. If it's a 10-to-1 kill ratio, that's 50,000 Russian dead. In 600 days, they've suffered almost as many dead as we lost in Vietnam in 10 years. So the idea that Russia is, not suffering anything, the Ukrainians are killing a lot of Russians. They're killing a lot of Russians. They do that using weaponry. The HARM missile takes out, when you take out a radar installation, there's a crew of guys in there. They're getting killed. When they come in with their drones, and they have their drones, and they drop their drones on, a Tor 2 system, and it blows up, the crew that was in there is dead. When they hit a Russian tank and the turret comes spinning off, the crew's dead. They're killing Russians. And they're killing a lot of Russians. I mean, we're not talking about a small number here. We're talking about a whole bunch of dead Russians are dying because the Ukrainians have lethality. It's just that the Russians have greater lethality and they're killing more Ukrainians. But so the MiG-29 was a pain in the butt for the Russians because it was taking off, and they can use unimproved airstrips, taking off, and then it would get to where it needs to be. And I think there's, I don't want to get into how things work, but there's a way to relay target data, and they'll fire the missile, and it's on occasion making target, and it's causing the Russians some problems because as they suppress Russian air defense, Ukrainians aren't stupid. Okay, they have a battle plan. They just haven't been able to execute it to its full fruition, but they have a battle plan. And so they pick a sector of the battlefield, and they're going to hit it with everything they got. They're going to drown it with electronic warfare. Yeah, the Ukrainians have electronic warfare, and they're using it. They're going to smother with artillery. They got a lot of artillery still, and they bring it in, and they put down massive amounts of fire on a given area. They're going to take out air defense so that Ukrainian, believe it or not, Su-25s come in and do close air support. And the same thing with HIP helicopters. They're coming in. You're hearing reports from the Russians saying all the time, we got hit by 3-4 Ukrainian airstrikes today. What the hell? I thought the Russians had air support. No, it's a complex battlefield. And the Ukrainians are pretty damn good at what they do. I mean, we can't ever forget that point. Even though I believe they've been strategically defeated, they're pretty damn. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know what one of the bloodiest moments in American military history was? It was the final 5 weeks of World War II on the Western Front. The final 5 weeks, after we went across the Rhine River, after we beat the Nazis. This is supposed to be the time when, like, the Germans were defeated. They were kicking the snot out of us. We'd get engaged in these battles, and the Germans are hooking and jabbing, a lot of lethality, a lot of good technology, a lot of good leadership. It wasn't all a bunch of Hitler youth. They still had units that were fighting, and we lost a lot of guys in that last 5 weeks. Even though we had strategically won, the war was over. Everybody knew it. I mean, you roll into April 1945, you know the war's over. And we lost a whole bunch of guys in that last 5 weeks because war is hell when the enemy's fighting. The Ukrainians have lost this war. Don't get me wrong. They can't win, but they are fighting, and they have the ability to fight. They have the technology to fight. They have the will to fight, and they're doing it. What the Russians just did, though, is take out one of the key things the Ukrainians had going for them. This MiG-29 with the harm used to be able to stay back in the back. They'd launch it in onesies and twosies and fire it off. Now that onesie to two goes up, they're done. All right, next day they bring two up, they're done. Next day they bring two up, they're done. And the Ukrainians are going, what the hell's going on? They don't know what's going on. They're looking around for the air ambush.
Yeah, you can't fly.
You can't fly. Nobody wants to fly anymore. Yeah, it's like the guy who it's like being a Ukrainian tanker. All right, today we're going to sort you out in our Leopard 2. Nope, you're going to sort you out in your Leopard 2. Mine just broke. It was good yet, but trust me, it just broke. I ain't going anywhere in my Leopard 2. And no, I mean, this is the reality of what's going on. And when you do this, again, it's just another piece of the puzzle that's been removed, another tool that's been removed from the Ukrainians that give the Russians that much more advantage. This is why you're seeing the Russians starting to go over on the offensive. The battles in Advika, the battles in Kupiansk. These are two major battles, two hugely important battles, what's going on right now, where Russia is simultaneously engaged in offensive operations that are designed to recreate meat grinder operations to eat up what's left of the Ukrainian army. And the Russians can do this now with greater latitude because you don't have MiG-29s coming in and taking out air defense, so you don't have Ukrainian aircraft coming in and blowing the crap out of your forces.
Let me ask you this. Let's move over to the Middle East. And you've been, you're familiar with the bases in the Middle East. We're starting to see attacks, light to medium attacks. There were some attacks on bases initially, and the U.S. reported that one guy died of a heart attack. Apparently, he was freaked out running and died of a heart attack. And the next day they said, well, there was actually 24 people injured in drone attacks. I suspect they're not telling us everything. But one of the things that I've heard out of the Middle East is if the U.S., if this thing kicks off and Hezbollah gets involved in the north and the U.S. decides we're going to come in and fight on behalf of Israel, that these militias everywhere are saying it's all out war against these U.S. bases, that these militias are going to attack them with everything they got. How vulnerable are these U.S. bases? And what do you think of that particular dynamic?
Let me put it this way. Every single one of these U.S. bases is a potential Alamo or Iswalhanda. That was the Zulu conflict where the British came out and they got swamped by the Zulus. We don't have sufficient force structure in Iraq or Syria to again, we're relying upon a reduced footprint on the ground, backed up by overwhelming air power coming in to support. That's the model. But you can't stack enough airplanes at the same time over everything. And what this new unified resistance front has done is they reached out and they touched all of our bases. They just said, hello, 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 and touched them. And the signal they're sending is, next time we touch you, it'll be even harder. And then if you want to do this, if you really want to play ball, we'll overrun you. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just wake you up to what's about to happen to all our wonderful boys and girls over there. Did you see what happened to the Israelis when Hamas came through the wall and went through and breached the perimeter and were wandering around, slaughtering the Israeli soldiers in their beds and other stuff? We got a whole bunch of contractors out there, a whole bunch of contractors. That's how we fight anymore. We don't have, because we can't recruit anybody in the military, so we have to get contractors to come in. Some of them are armed and some of them can fight, but the majority of them are just there to, tweak dials and do things. They're all going to die. They're all going to die screaming, running. Maybe they'll die of a heart attack. That's probably my model. If I was there, I'd be running, screaming, and dying of a heart attack. I'm not picking on this dude. I mean, that's what happens to 60-year-old guys when they're placed under a tremendous amount of stress. But the young bucks, I don't care how brave you are. You can only do so much. The trigger only pulls so fast. The eyes only process so many targets. And you can be shooting, and they're going to get in, they're going to hit you. And when you go down, there's one gap in your line, boom, and they're going to roll the whole thing up, and it's over, instant. Think Custer's Last Stand. It wasn't the way it's shown on TV. It was literally the cavalry going in, running for their lives, and the Indians coming in, and they just rolled over them. In the last group, 40 guys got off their horses and turned around. They got off a couple rounds and they got swamped. They're done. I liken it to Game of Thrones and when the Lannisters got hit by the Dothraki. That's what's going to happen, guys. They're just going to come in and it's going to be over. There's not a damn thing we can do about it. They will pick apart. We think we have perfect defenses. They will pick that stuff apart. And then they're just going to come in numbers that we can't handle, and they're going to end it. It's going to be over, and it'll be simultaneous attack, coordinated attack throughout Iraq, throughout Syria. It's done. They don't want to do this. They're sending a signal to us. Back the heck off. First of all, my understanding is that if Hezbollah gets involved, we ain't dropping a bomb on Hezbollah. That'd be the dumbest thing in the world, because Hezbollah has precision-guided munitions. You do know that those aircraft carriers are within Hezbollah's striking distance, and they have systems that can take out these carriers. We're not there for that. We're there as a projection of force, a deterrence. But we're not there to engage Hezbollah. First of all, Hezbollah has, by some counts, up to 100,000, 200,000 rockets. And it's more than just the Katyushkas. What the Hezbollah is going to do if this thing kicks off is they're going to flood northern Israel and central Israel with more primitive rockets. And the Iron Dome is going to go pop, 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 click, 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 click. Out of ammo. And now that they're out of ammo, they're going to come in with the precision guided stuff. And they're just going to take Israel apart. There's not a damn thing. And Israel's got an Air Force, Scott. They're going to bomb. You know what happened in Midway, guys, when you send out airplanes and they do their thing, and on the way home, their aircraft carrier got sunk? They were sort of screwed. If you're the Americans, you tried to divert to the Hornet or the Lexington or whatever was alive. If you're the Japanese, you were screwed because there ain't nowhere left to land. You all came back and went, nobody writes about that, how the Japanese aircraft had to fly around till they ran out of fuel, try and go, the pilots try to land next to a destroyer to get plucked up, but the destroyer, that's where a lot of Japanese pilots finished their lives, running out of fuel because the aircraft carrier was gone. So these Israeli planes, they're going to take off from airfields that are going to be not existing anymore by the time it comes time to land.
Well, let me just say this, because I mentioned this the other day. If, in fact, it goes that direction, we certainly hope it doesn't. Let's say they've got half. Let's say they got 50,000. They could put 1,000 missiles on every Israeli military base after they overwhelm the system so the system can't protect itself anymore. Which, let's face it, if they put 100 missiles on but 1,000 on every base, which means that Israel's military is effectively out of commission. And how do you build up in the middle of a war? It's amazing that a non-state actor like this, with the technology available now. Let me ask you this. I got to add this. We were told recently that there were some ships in the Red Sea or something, and that they exchanged, that the Houthis, the Ansar Allah, shot a couple of missiles at Israel and they intercepted them. That's what we were told. 2 days later, the story comes out that it was actually about a 12-hour battle, and that there was missiles and there was drones, etc., coming at these ships. And again, I think all this stuff is, as you've said, I think it's a brushback. I think it's an elbow, a shot across the bow to say, we want to let you know We're going to come in and mix it up with you a little bit. This ain't the real fight. But if that happens, those ships, even a poor country like Yemen, but how expensive is it? How hard is it with today's technology to build a missile, put a little GPS locator on it, radio locator on it, dial it in, see you later. It's over. So what are your thoughts on even that? When you look at the totality all over the Middle East, there are these militias, there's these people with missiles, with technology that are angry. And a lot of them are itching for a fight. From what I hear, a lot of them are really angry. Scott.
Well, there's no doubt that they're angry. I have another spin on this. First of all, we don't know what the U.S. did, what the USS Carney did. What I can say is this, that's air crew, or the crew of the Carney had never been in combat before. They've never been attacked before. Their systems, they don't have experience in operating these systems in an environment. They're entering into a war zone that has more electronic warfare taking place than you could imagine right now. So it's a heavy, signals rich environment. And the reason why I bring that up is, back in January 17th, I believe it was, in 1991, outside of Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, an American Patriot battery shot down the first Scud missile. They got a Bronze Star for it. They were heroes. We shot down the Scud. Now, I would have loved to have been the Iraqis going, we didn't fire a Scud. What'd you guys shoot down? Anybody shoot anything? We didn't shoot anything. Because I know what I was doing. I was with the other guys calling up the DSP satellites in Colorado Springs going, y'all see anything? Because they're saying they shot down a Scud. If they shot down a Scud because you didn't see anything, we're screwed. Did you see anything? There were no launches. We didn't see any infrared things. We call up the big radar in Turkey. You see anything? Nothing. Because there wasn't a Scud missile. Because these crews are sitting there totally untested, never been in combat before, with a system that's on automatic, and the AWACS, which is flying, and the EA-6s that are out there jamming the Iraqis and collecting, those signals created a ghost in the machine. And the radar saw something, and because the system was on automatic, it fired. And the target disappeared, so you assume you hit. I'm here to bet you a dime to a dollar, Garland, that this hours-long firefight was a firefight amongst themselves, a system at war with itself, a system that was seeing ghosts and was firing off because it had never been done before. Was in an automatic mode, a hypersensitive mode, and the people manning this are not veterans of war, and they're letting the system fire, and they blew off a lot of ammo that day, killing nothing. Why do I say that? Because the Houthi aren't stupid. Why would the Houthi attack the USS Carney or attack Israel? The Houthi are in the middle of a ceasefire with Saudi Arabia that's designed to improve not only the humanitarian situation for millions of people on the ground, who the Houthi government are responsible for, but also enable the Houthi to get into a more operationally advantageous posture in certain areas. So if the war continues, they can move on and complete the task. The Houthi are also sort of beholden to Iran about these systems. It's one thing for the Houthi to fire a system against a Saudi threat inside Yemen. They sort of have the operational latitude to do that. But if you recall when the Houthi fired against the Aramco facility in September 2019, that had to be green-lighted by the Iranians. The Iranians had to say this because there are geopolitical consequences that accrue from that action that involve Iran. So Iran isn't going to let the Houthi initiate something where Iran's going, well, we didn't want that to happen. It happened because the Iranians said, we want it to happen. We're ready for it to happen. Could you imagine if this was a Houthi attack and they sank the USS Carney? What would be happening right now in Yemen? It'd be going boom. A lot of places would be going boom. So all of the advantages that the Houthi were trying to get from the ceasefire are gone, finished. They now have the United States targeting them, and that's a whole different ballgame than the Saudis, because we are a vengeful people. And you sink a ship and you kill a bunch of American sailors, we're coming at you until you're done. Now, you can say, well, Scott, hey, we took out the Taliban. Ask them how many boys they buried back in 2001, 2002. Okay, we came in with a vengeance. 20 years later, we left. And then we probably leave 20 years later from the Houthis too. But we devastated that place. Is that what Yemen wanted? No. Is that what Iran wanted? They just made peace with the Saudis, reconciliation. They're part of BRICS. They're part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They're finally beating sanctions. They finally got the U.S. to do a prisoner swap where they freed up $6 billion worth of assets in South Korea that can be released to enable their economy to function further. The last thing they want is for some Houthi yahoos to fire off missiles against the USS Carney and hit it and sink it and turn the whole region. There was no missile launch against the Carney. I will bet a lot of money on that. I will bet that the U.S. Carney had a firefight, an intramural firefight with itself because that. But your point, though, is well taken. That we have these systems, and we're going to find out the hard way if we engage Hezbollah, because they have systems out there. Again, let's just look at the Arrow, not the Arrow, the Iron Dome system. Each one of these TASNIM missiles, or whatever they call them, the interceptor missiles, is what, a $1.5–2 million proposition? Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. So here we go. Hamas spends about $3,000 to produce one of these bottle rockets, and they bing off 150 of them. 30% of them, I'm not too good on math, but that would be about 30? No, 30%, 50. 50 of them sort of fall short. They don't function, never engaged. The other 100 keep going. And let's say of those 100, 30 of them are predicted to fall outside of a threat range. You're not going to engage. But 70 are coming to places that have to be hit. So 70 times, well, let's 150 times 2. So the Hamas just spent $300,000. Now, to get to 70, Israel's going to expend $140 million.
You lost that one.
I'm a simple Marine, but that equation can be played out all day long, and eventually you're in trouble, which is the trouble that they're running into now. Israel's run out of these interceptor rockets. The United States was told to bring in more. We delivered like 360. We got nothing left. They got nothing left. And if Hezbollah gets in the fight, all these things are gone. How much ammunition do you think an aircraft carrier carries? I mean, so if it gets hit with wave after wave of low tech, and it's got that CWIS thing, there ain't an infinite amount of ammunition. You got the destroyers out there popping off their SM2s, SM3s, pop, 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 shooting things down, pop, 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 pop. There ain't an infinite amount of ammunition, guys. Eventually, it's going to go click, click, click. And it's like being in a gunfight. You're in the OK Corral, and you're click, click, click. You're dead. Because the other guy's going to go pop.
The other thing I think is this, and that is, the problem would be some kind of a civilizational war where the Muslim community, the Muslim nations just say, look, it's all out, us versus you, because we've pissed off everybody. Now, literally in Kuwait, they're marching saying U.S. is not our friend. We hate the U.S. and Israel. Okay.
Yeah.
If you've got bases being attacked, being hit, and they're calling saying, hey, we need some air support, we need somebody to come in here and hit these people, but you got people coming after the carriers and the ships hitting Israel. So you have this theater around Israel where you're under attack and you are heavily engaged, and there you got this over here, hey, we need some help, some air support. What about over here? We do too. Oh, we're getting hit over here. It gets to the point where you can't fight everybody, you know what I mean? And you can't engage everywhere. And now your planes have to fly 500 miles to this base. They got to get refueled to protect these bases. And they're calling saying we can get a couple of planes there, but it's going to take them an hour. It's going to take them 45 minutes. It's going to take 2 hours to get somebody. Oh, they got to come back and refuel. It gets to the point where regardless of how much horsepower you have, if you're at war with a whole region, you're overwhelmed. We only about 5 minutes, Scott, and then we're out.
No, I mean you're 100% correct. Again, and it gets even more complicated. What if Iran? Okay, we attack Hezbollah. What if Iran gets involved? Because now those air bases that you think you're operating out of in Qatar and You ain't operating out of, and now you've lost all advantage. I mean, again, that new Russian missile, although the way we fight, we have tankers out there that are drilling holes in the sky. And we come in and we tank off, get a full fuel tank, and then we go off and we bomb. During the Gulf War, I mean, during the counter Scud operation, we had the tankers out there. We were just basically cycling A-10s in. They'd strike, go back, fuel up, go back, strike, go back. F-15s doing the same thing. But what happens when the tanker goes boom? You ain't got a flying gas station anymore. And you were bingo fuel, meaning that you weren't planning on going home. You needed to gas up to go home. You now run out of fuel. You got to eject. That's the end of your airplane. The entire model that we've built for force projection in the Middle East is predicated on things that cannot be assumed anymore, especially when you have the world turning on us. This isn't about saying that that I approve of what Hamas did. I don't. What this is about saying is what Hamas has done is changed the entire paradigm of the Middle East going forward. It will never be the same. Israel, because of its overreaction, if you remember after 9/11, a lot of people were saying, let's not overreact here, guys. Let's ask the question why this happened, and then let's solve the problem so it doesn't happen again. But this blind, we're going to go out there and go to war against Iraq that had nothing to do with it. We're going to seek to take over 7 nations, according to Clark. When we go into Afghanistan, we're just going to blind vengeance. We will not cooperate with the Taliban. The Taliban were sending signals saying, hey, if Al-Qaeda did what you said they did, they sort of violated the Pushtun-Wali code, we'll take them out. But we need you to make sure we're not going to negotiate with terrorists. We're going to come in and get you. And that's what we did. And what happened? 20 years later, we lost. We're out. We tore up the whole region. We are far worse off today because of our overreaction in 9/11, geopolitical transformation of the Middle East. It's happening again right now because Israel has been lured into a trap. Hamas did what they did to get Israel to do what it's doing. The sad thing is the Palestinian people are being sacrificed in the meantime. But Israel has lost the world. They're isolated today. They're done.
Let me add this, Scott. I don't know if people have seen it, but there's articles everywhere. So, and I think this is significant. Barack Obama, I don't know if you read it. He's come out and written this article criticizing Israel, saying, hey, what he said? You're basically, I'll sum it up. You're losing the world. What you just said is basically what he's saying. You're losing the world. Hey, back off. Hey, you're killing a lot of civilians. He's standing up. I think that means when Obama speaks, still a very powerful, powerful voice in American politics. I think that means that there are very, very powerful factions in DC saying this Blinken, Sullivan, neocon stuff is bad, and we are trying to send a message. When Obama comes out, it's not Barack Obama by himself saying that, I think. I think he speaks for very powerful factions. And when they criticize Israel, I think it's because, let's face it, it's obvious. They're losing the world. When they come out and say it, I think there's some internal real power struggles and arguments going on right now, Scott. Last word.
No, I agree. Look, we just sent a Marine Lieutenant General. He's the commander of Marine Special Operations Regiment, the MARSOC Special Operations Community, man with extensive experience in urban warfare, and he has a bunch of other Marines and people there. And they've gone to Israel, and what they're telling the Israeli army is, hey, you guys want to go into Gaza, right? Let's talk about your plan. What do you got for a plan? And then they're talking to me going, that ain't going to work. You guys do know that's not going to work. Well, let me see your training plan. The Givati Brigade's going to go in? Hey, they're a pretty good brigade. We've read about them. We like the Givati guys. Let's see your training plan. What was the last time you did the coordinated urban assault? You've never done that. And you want to go into Gaza. Have you guys done the underground subterranean combat course? No, you haven't done that either? What is your plan? And then have you logistically sustained? Have you done the logistical sustainment plan for urban operations? You don't have that plan, do you? You guys haven't thought this through at all. You're going to all die. And we're here to tell you as Americans, we won't support this. I know you want revenge. We're here to help you get revenge. We're in the revenge business, guys. But if you don't have a plan, because what they're really telling them is don't go into Gaza. And the reason why they're telling them that is because Barack Obama's, it's not, you're right. It's not just Barack Obama.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's more than this, Garland. I mean, let me be as blunt as I can. It's the American Jewish community that's saying, do you understand what you're doing to Israel? You are creating the condition where Jews once again become targets around the world. What you're doing is turning the world. All the things that we've been fighting for since the end of the Second World War, so that it's never again, you're making it ready to happen again. We don't feel safe at home now because there's a whole bunch of people out there that view us as the bad guys, view us as the enemy because of you, because of what you're doing in Gaza. We don't support this. And I think that's the signal that's being sent. We can't tell them straight. I mean, I believe we should. I think we should just be very honest with them and saying, not one more dollar goes your way. I mean, fire him, fire him, fire him. The UN ambassador that just spoke out against Guterres, because Guterres had the intellectual forthrightness to say, October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, it's an honest statement. You can't say that. You have to resign. So Israel's now in a position of demanding the resignation of the Secretary General. That's how sick and demented Israel has become. They are literally rabid dogs. And, so what we're doing right now is we're letting them growl, we're letting them snap. And unfortunately, that means thousands of dead Palestinians. I mean, we're letting them murder people. We're letting them commit genocide, but we're trying to do it in a controlled way to prevent this thing from going out of control. Because we know what happens if Hezbollah comes in. We know what happens if the Islamic resistance decide they want to swamp us. It's thousands of Americans who are going to die. It's the end of the global economy if we go to war against Iran. We know the consequences of this. And so we're telling the Israelis, you can't do it. This has changed everything because the Israelis now, in order to get peace, they're no longer, the terms they dictated with the Abrams Accords will never exist again. Israel now has to come back to Yitzhak Rabin level Oslo Accord or even more. The whole dynamic of the Middle East has changed.
Well, add this. I got to add this. If this thing kicked off and the United States is protecting Israel and we get a bunch of bases just overrun, a couple thousands of guys wiped out, there are a lot of people in America that are going to be pissed at Israel. There's a lot of people in America who are going to blame Israel and say, you got our guys killed. You know what I mean? It's a no-win situation for Israel. The way to go, I'll say what I said at the UNSC meeting. The way to go is a ceasefire and a humanitarian aid for civilians and a diplomatic resolution. That's the only thing. It will save civilian lives and it will save Israel. If Israel goes forward, they got big problems. They're because not just the Muslim community, people throughout the world are furious at them. People that didn't even know about that much about it are furious at them. They're seeing it. So, but at any rate, Scott, thanks a lot. Everybody, don't forget, go to ScottRitterExtra.com. ScottRitterExtra.com. That's where you can find all of Scott's good work. And hey, like everybody else, Scott's got to eat. He's got to feed the family. Go to ScottRitterExtra.com. And there are ways there that you can help support Scott. He doesn't charge anything for his work on there. So please, take the opportunity to contribute to Scott's work at ScottRitterExtra.com. You see everybody, everything, Patreon, buy me a coffee, etc. Scrolling across the bottom. If you can help, fine. Make sure you put this video up, that you share it on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot, Scott. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, John.
We are out.